Hey, C21 Veterans, Ken and Mel coming to you from beautiful downtown Bristol. How we doing today?
It's pretty hot.
Pretty hot is correct. We are currently in the middle of a heat wave. I'm not telling you anything you guys don't want to or don't already know. But what I am telling you is that we have two new documents coming out this week. Here they are. We're going to go through them a little bit just to make sure that we have an understanding as an organization of how they're going to work. And what we think about them, and also I guess we're going to put out a link to this one and this one that are marked up so that you'll have your own copies now on July 1st when they go live. They won't have this big word sample, they won't have different colors, but it might make sense for you to get really familiar with this because there are significant changes in the seller's disclosure.
You look, the red and the purple are there. I think it's purple, it might be blue, I don't know. The red is there because the red is everything that is new and the purple is things that are changed. So
it wasn't the previous document,
yes.
It's just moved around or something like that.
But it's helpful because if you don't have the red version to know what is brand new, when you go to look at the brand new one that comes out July 1st, you're not going to know exactly what the differences were. And again, you kind of want to go through this red and blue one so that you understand what exactly is changing, because they've added a lot and there's might be some explanation from you guys now because there are some key differences. Key. Yeah,
I mean, we're not playing, gang. This is seller's property disclosure. You know how important we think it is.
Yeah.
So you might want to get familiar with it. Anyway, let's bang through some of the changes.
All right. So, oh my God, I should probably have my
Oh boy, there they are, right there. Look at that.
My glasses on. All right. So one of the big changes is we used to tell the executors of an estate, you're the executor, you don't know anything, put a big cross through it and go ahead and sign it. And well, that's not the case anymore. So the state has, I guess, not like that executors put lines through, and if you know something as an executor, you have to disclose it if it's a material defect. So the one executor I can kind of figure may not know anything is when the county kind of assigns somebody and says, that's it, there's no family, so they're in charge. Or a family member who's been distant, lives in California forever and hasn't seen the property, might not know anything about the property. But if you're an executor, you are filling this out to the best of your knowledge as to material defects. So if you
in this case, a lot of people are doing estate planning 20, 30 years. They're transferring the ownership of a property to a sibling or to a son or a daughter, and they have knowledge of what's happened. So as the executor, you're no longer off the hook just because you're the executor. If you have knowledge, you have to disclose it.
Yeah. The other thing is power of attorneys are also not exempt anymore. So if you're a power of attorney acting on behalf of the seller, seller happens to be in a nursing home, they're completely competent, but they can't sign or fill this in, and there's a power of attorney. That power of attorney is tasked with asking the questions and filling this in to the best of the person's knowledge that is answering those questions. So that's a little bit of a key thing that, you know, the executor is now going to, oh my goodness, I should eat. The executor is now going to have to fill this in. So
it's the world we live in, yeah.
I know, my timer goes off, I must eat. All right, so one more thing on ownership. They're going to ask how many people live in the property. I kind of think that's a weird question, but I think it was pertaining more towards like septic. How many people live there? That way they can kind of gauge that system. And the other one on living there is the question that says, when was the property acquired?
Ooh.
Right? Acquired, not when did you purchase the property? And the key difference is that,
why would they say that?
Well, because apparently people that were rented for a couple years, maybe just a year, they knew things had happened, but they weren't filling in that part of the disclosure because they were like, not mine, not my issue.
Right, as if it didn't exist.
Exactly.
However,
it did exist.
Yeah.
So you have to fill it in. So it is now the date acquired. So if you live there or your parents live there prior to this and you are now the owner and your parents live there for 10 years, you live there for a year, you're selling it, everything that happened during your parents' ownership that you had knowledge of is in this document now. Right. So that's a little bit of a key factor. My other lovely factor is, and I go back and forth with this, is if you have knowledge of a previous seller's items, because, you know, you've got one of these lovely disclosures when you purchase the house, that's kind of a disclosable issue now. So they don't want you just disclosing you during your ownership. They actually ask very distinct questions. When was the roof installed? So if you bought the house in 2016 and the roof was installed in 2015, and you know that because your previous seller's disclosure stated that the previous seller did
Or
that,
you asked
right?
for it.
Right, or you asked for a new roof during your inspection part. The old owner technically did it, but you had knowledge of it. So one of the suggestions that we're going to give you is that to keep the current seller out of trouble is that they use the wording, you know, the year that they know, right, from their disclosure, 2015, roof was installed by or as per previous seller.
Right.
So what you're giving is the knowledge, because obviously a roof that's only a couple years old is a benefit.
Big selling point.
Right, but you
Yeah.
don't want to have, you don't want to be giving wrong dates, stuff like that. So if you have, and again, we're required to keep records for a couple years. So a seller saying, I don't know, I don't have that, is not going to fly with a judge, because we do have these, right? We do have them from a couple years back. So
one of my favorite words, liability.
Right. So
don't
fill it
accept
in
the liability.
and use the words as per previous seller. That will help a lot when you if something comes up and they said, well, that roof was installed in 2013, not 15. Well, I didn't know that. I wrote it from the previous seller. I wasn't giving you an exact date.
Right.
So
you're not accepting responsibility
Exactly.
for that, just trying to transfer the knowledge on.
So that's on there. The other thing is the question is, has the roof ever leaked during your ownership? Right. So I can't really give you the fact that the roof leaked 25 years ago. I only owned the house 10 years, but I can give you if the roof was installed more than before my ownership and I know it. So you do have separate questions. That's why I want you guys to understand when it says when was it installed, or when was there an issue during your ownership, and that comes up a lot in a lot of these questions. So you guys want to make sure you have that distinction with the seller. The other one is there is now a block when you explain, yes, I understand there's a roof leak or whatever. It's going to ask you who did the work.
Yeah, man, who fixed it?
Who did it, right?
Yeah.
So you got to have either the contractor. It's okay to state seller repaired themselves. That's fine.
You don't care.
Right, but you do have to state who now. You can't just say roof was repaired in 2018 during a hurricane. It now has to say roof was repaired in 2018 during a hurricane by the seller or by Jim Roofer or whatever. And that comes through in every single one of these. So where you have like main spaces that you have to explain, it says who was it repaired by. So that's kind of everywhere. If you don't know, you don't know, right? So something happened 15 years ago.
Yeah, all of this is the best of your knowledge.
Right.
You know, it's you know, things that happened 15 years ago. I don't know who installed my roof on my house 15 years ago. So,
Right.
you know, unless you have some paperwork or some way to track it, what you're trying to do is and again, it's all plain language. There's nothing confusing about this. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get as much information to the potential buyer as possible, so that as we alleviate potential liability, right, for the seller.
All right, so termites also brings up past or present. It's very specific in red. Do you have any knowledge of past or present? So a lot of times the owners that are selling are like, no, I have no knowledge, but they've got those little like drill holes out in the concrete. Well, they're termite holes, right? They're dug there, or drilled there specifically by the termite company. So you may not have specific knowledge of when it was done, but those holes indicate it had been done previously.
Right.
So that's something that you want to say yes to, and then state that this was done by previous owners. We have had no treatment since, right? Or you had a treatment because you moved in. Any treatment, radon, anything, all this has to be disclosed. But again, past or present is very key here. You cannot just turn around and say, I have no idea. I don't know where those holes are for.
Right.
Must have been, I don't know, a kid.
Termites.
Right. So yeah, you got to kind of disclose that stuff. Alterations, that's kind of the normal. They now are including remodeling. So if you have remodeled your basement, you remodeled a bathroom, that's all got to be put on here. Do you have yes, no on permits? And now there's actually an NA. I don't know what like an NA is for do you have permits, but it's on there. Let me say what else. They increased the well and public, and they also have a thing on here that says who exactly is your service provider for septic and for water. It is not meaning because it's a well, it's for anybody. If you have public or you have private, it is who is your water company or services your water, and who is your sewer company and who services your sewer company. A lot of this is on here because we don't know, and the buyer has no idea who it is. So that's why they kind of pulled that stuff in, that you have to actually explain now who your service provider is. I think that's a little bit helpful anyway. Okay, so a ton of questions on lot sewage. It's not good enough at this point to just say I have a sewer system, like a sewage company. or system in my backyard, you kind of have to know now what it is. So the seller may not understand or know. So this could be, I have sewer in my backyard and I have no idea what kind it is. It could be that. If it is none of these, because you have private or because you have public, you have to hit NA. Like, you can't just bypass these questions. The NA button is on here, so make sure every single one of these is filled in. I think like, oh, domestic water and heat. You are now being asked, do you have propane? And if you do, is the tank owned by the seller? So that's a specific question they want to know from the seller. Do you have solar? And is it owned by the seller? Because a lot of these are rented. The tanks
Well, a lot of this
rented.
stuff's coming out of lawsuits,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, buyer walked in, bought the house, you know, two months later wanted to change propane company told them that they don't own the tanks.
Yeah.
You know, so stuff like that happens all the time.
Pellet stove was added. That's kind of cool because apparently, I don't know, you didn't think that pellet stoves came with the house. They're attached, so I don't know why you have to have that in here, but I guess you do. So now you've got pellet stoves, you have air conditioning. They have even broken out into those split systems. So you have to answer yes, no to central, to windows, to walls, to split systems in the heat and that. So, and is your electric panel solar? Again, is it owned by you and does it power the entire house or not? One of the categories they brought up to us that is apparently not filled out very well and causing a lot of lawsuits is the paragraph that has all the appliances added to it. Right. So I always thought, like, I don't know, I'm not giving you my fridge, so I'm not going to answer, has there ever been a problem with my fridge? And the reason that it's on here is this has no bearing on whether or not the fridge or the washer, the dryer, or anything is leaving or staying.
We're not making that up, by the way. Again, there's a statement in there that says it may or may not be included.
Right.
Yeah.
The reason it's here is because I had a fridge that actually leaked, and my fridge went into the floor, caused the entire subfloor to be ruined, and I had to replace that. So that's why they want to know, it's did you ever have a problem with your fridge? My answer is yes, and then I explain it, right? Because you may not have explained it in another part of this where it said flooring, have you ever had any leaks? You don't think about it until you get to the part that says, oh, is there a problem with the fridge? I just think I'm not leaving my fridge, so I'm not going to explain anything to you. It has nothing to do with the appliance itself. It has to do with the cause of the issue.
Floor,
yes.
Yeah.
I didn't have a moldy floor. I fixed it. Okay, and then pools and spas are now included. Huge red. It's very specific. Do you have a pool? Is it in-ground? Is it heated? Is it vinyl? Is it all of this stuff? They explained that this is because we're in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania does not have a large amount of time to be able to swim in a pool. So the majority of the time when you're purchasing a house, it is covered. And you can't really see if it's a vinyl or a concrete. Maybe the owner doesn't know or didn't fill it out, didn't pay attention. So now that's included. It asks what is included. Has there ever been problems? Has there been problems with the pumps? I guess you got to know all that stuff. And then hot tub, again, doesn't matter if it's staying. My hot tub is not going to stay with my house, but I would still have to include whether or not I had a problem with it. They break out windows again, all by himself. I guess you have to answer windows completely separate from everything else. And we get to paragraph 20 on boundaries. This is where Lower Bucks Joint Municipal Authority comes in, because boundaries, do you know of any encroachments, boundary lines, disputes, or easements affecting the property? It's kind of like a yes if you live under high power lines. It's kind of a yes if you live in Lower Bucks. But you may not say yes to that part because you just really don't know. I would explain in that line where it says yes, I would actually write Lower Bucks County Joint Municipal Authority easement, because it is an easement and it is accessible by the municipality whenever they feel like coming onto the property. So
I mean, if we take what we have and knowledge that we already know, right? If you look out at your house right now and notice that there's a telephone pole on your lawn with a wire hanging off on it, 100% of the time you're going to have an easement on your property because the township owns that pole. Right.
And it's not really meant for that. It's really meant for the Lower Bucks part, because you move into a house and the buyer doesn't know that that back part of their property isn't really like used for anything. You can't put a pool on it. You can't put a shed on it. You can't apparently at this point plant bushes and trees on it.
Right.
So that's where you kind of want to, as the seller or the listing agent, is discuss with them, please write Lower Bucks County Joint Municipal Easement, because that's going to indicate that the buyer now has knowledge that there's an easement on that property. And if they come back to you in a year and say, I had no idea I couldn't plant bushes in the back of my lawn, The easement part is in here. So,
and again, don't take it as you know, we're the professionals. We know the difference. I guarantee if you ask my wife what those wires are in the back there, she wouldn't use the word easement. It's
right.
not, she doesn't, it's not what she does. So it's up to us to explain it to those people.
Correct. Radon, back to the termite thing. If you had a radon test or you have a radon system in your house, that means you have knowledge that there was radon potentially in the home, and you've got to disclose any testing, any previous testing. So if the previous seller gave you a test that they did 15 years ago that said there was radon of 4.5 and they put a mitigation system on and you have knowledge of that, you got to disclose it. So,
as per previous seller's disclosure.
Yes, per previous seller's disclosure. That's, I love these things. And then, all right, so they have an other category under hazardous that says include test results and the location of the hazardous substances or environmental issues. So you got to break out that stuff. If you have a test, great. If you have radon testing done and you don't have the result, just simply state, I had a test done, don't have the results, and
pass, fail, and whatever information you can put in there.
Just disclose it.
Yep.
All right, that's pretty much it. And again, back to your, oh, there is paragraph, the last paragraph, paragraph 22, it's in financial, and it says, are you aware of any insurance claims filed relating to this property during your ownership? Please disclose. We just had this come up actually with Cindy. Her seller had a insurance claim for a fire. There was no fire on the actual property. It was,
failed to mention it.
Yeah, it was at a building a couple doors down, but the smoke, because the smoke, it was just a smoke issue, right? So they had an insurance claim. Which caused them to
rehab the entire kitchen.
I don't remember what they did.
Yeah.
But
you know, they
did do something, and there was an insurance claim which now came up during the clue report, and there was an issue with what happened? Oh my God, there was a fire. Oh. So then the buyer got a little upset because they weren't disclosed a fire, which was no fire. So that part is going to ask the question, just kind of make sure. And again, once this goes from red to black, you're not even going to remember that that part's in there. So that is why we are going to attach to this lovely long video, because it's the summer and nobody wants to come out, especially in this heat.
We're along on this one. And it's not going to get any easier.
Red and black, or red, black, and purple. Make sure you go through it, or keep it with you. I have it on my computer because sometimes it's easier to read these to just kind of verify the changes when I'm going to a listing appointment and kind of know what I'm talking about. So
not to be outdone, we have a new, throwing it everywhere, a new appraisal contingency, right?
Yeah.
Notice how red it is down at the bottom here, right? There are, I don't know, there's a couple of things that are true about this, right?
It's confusing.
It is confusing. As you go through the document, you're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, what am I committing my client to, right? As you fill in the gaps, as you try to figure out how to get a deal done, try to remember that we're not always going to be in this market, right? So this document is going to live for the foreseeable future. My thought process is that it won't be necessary this time next year, right? But in the meantime, if you check option 2 on this document, you have committed your buyer. And I need to be very, very clear about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that I got when I was watching the PAR video on this is the PAR video said, read this and read it again and read it for the 4th time, because it is, I must have read this 3 or 4 times. Ken and I debated a bunch yesterday on this document because it is worded oddly and it is difficult, because the reason they did an addendum for the appraisal contingency is there are a lot of people covering the gap, right? We want to write an offer for 200 or for 300,000, but it's in the MLS for 280, right? So there's a $20,000 gap in there. They needed something that would hold the buyer in, because nobody, obviously the seller doesn't want to go back on the market and they want to have that buyer stay in. The buyer's willing to stay in and pay cash, right? So we were all writing into the lovely agreements of sale. Buyer will cover any gap with cash, between the appraisal price and this. And so what this does is it sets a minimum appraisal price of 280 or whatever you want to put in there, 290, doesn't much matter. That the house must appraise at this, and anything between that and the price that the buyer offered is covered either in cash or as a difference in the mortgage, because that's one of those options down here in red. They can do whatever they need to do to get to the table, but the buyer is covering that gap for the 280 to the 300. So that's awesome that they covered that. One of the issues we're finding is that it didn't always cover when they started renegotiating and saying, but oh my, what if I don't get to this price? What if I only want to cover 5,000 in the gap? This document is not for any of that. This
Doesn't do that.
document, nope,
Yeah, it doesn't
is
do
just
that.
for the regular appraisal contingency, meaning if it doesn't appraise, we're negotiating, or if it doesn't appraise, we've already set buyers come in with the amount of cash between the appraisal and the purchase price. So they're covering the entire gap that would be in there.
In the scenario that Melanie just described, you're back to doing an addendum, which is practicing law and totally against the law.
Right, so be careful with writing anything in there that says buyer will cover up to $5,000 between $280,000 and $300,000. Like that's all the stuff that requires attorneys. I know people write them in there, but you got to be really careful, and that's what this document was brought in for. So it is the new appraisal contingency addendum, and again, the red is on there on purpose. We're going to attach this document as well so you can read it. This one, the seller's disclosure, you don't have to read 4 times. Like it's pretty self-explanatory. This document, no kidding, I had to read it a couple times. So they weren't kidding when they said read it and read it again.
Yeah, just understand what you're committing your guy to and have them sign it. Option 1, option 2. If we don't have a preference, you should deal with what best suits your scenario. And as always, if you have any questions or you just want to bounce it off somebody, we're more than happy to sit there and we did this for 2 hours yesterday on this document. Like,
it got pretty heated.
Yeah, don't you people have anything better to do? Goal here is to make sure that we all get to wear golf shirts instead of suits and ties.
I don't even have a tie.
You don't look good in the tie.
I don't look good in a tie.
See you guys soon.
Bye.